D?SO, I'm just going to call you D. He's a member of my Discord, which you can join in the description. A while ago I had a thought in the back of my mind that I'm ashamed to admit I didn't really give much energy to. It was in a controller teardown, and in it I came across a rubber pad covering up the micro switches like the US government covering up their after-school activities. This set something off in my head, but I kind of set it down and didn't really pick it back up until D hit me up in the Discord and brought up the same issue, noting it can severely hinder performance in a few ways we're going to be looking at today. The sad truth is that most pro controllers using mechanical buttons are doing them wrong. It's a CoffeeZilla Ponzi scheme. That being said, where is it?
Where are they?
My review on the Wolverine V2 Pro will probably still be called the mechanical PS5 controller. If you're interested in seeing that video and you go on to enjoy this one, be sure to subscribe. Now, let's fuck shit up. Yo! We do have a sponsor. I don't know if we do now. PCBWay's a company I featured on the channel for quite a while. They're a company I used in a previous project a little over a year ago, and I plan to do more projects with them in the future for more controller testing related stuff. Obviously they do PCB manufacture. These are one of the PCBs I have. They also do 3D printing, CNC machining and shit, with decent prices and great turnaround time. So if you're interested in making your own controller project or something else DIY, maybe a see-through keyboard with a cool PCB like those Gamester controllers, be sure to hit up PCBWay via the link in the description, and thank you so much to them for sponsoring today's video, if they still are. Omron and Kale rule the pro controller world with their mini micro switches rated for what are usually between 3 and 5 million clicks, with a max actuation distance of around 0.7 millimeters. That's really just the furthest I've seen so far. These switches are small, sometimes reliable, and fun to use. Controllers featuring these switches, like these, sound and feel amazing, which at the end of the day is all the manufacturer really needs to do to convince the consumer they're worth purchasing. It's a beautiful thing I like to call controller propaganda. The problems arise most commonly when using these switches for the action buttons, so ABXY or the shape buttons if you have pronouns in your bio. A small rubber pad, or in the case of the Stealth Ultra, a metal spring, is inserted in between the actual button and the switch on the motherboard, effectively making them clicky buttons that in some ways feel and perform like membrane ones. They even show this rubber pad clear as day in one of the Easy SMX controllers I'm reviewing soon. I don't have it here though. This dampens the press and adds a lot of travel to a button that is advertised as being extremely short. And it ruins one of the key aspects of mechanical gaming, which is like speed. Speed, reliability, and then lastly you have some objective things like sound or feel, which some people don't really particularly care for, but I know we all care about speed and reliability. A more reliable experience, sure, but one that could definitely be faster. These are fucking dark. However, there is one trade-off here, and that is that some of these dampened controllers actually have less resistance than those that aren't. The Razer Wolverine Ultimate and SCUF Envision Pro have very short travel distance with little resistance in the way. And while nothing really comes close to the Wolverine Ultimate and its incredibly sensitive buttons, the SCUF Envision Pro, on the other hand, is basically on par with a lot of these other dampened controllers, even without a spring or a rubber pad in the way. And then controllers like the eSwap S and X, again, controllers without dampening, are on par with some of the worst of the dampened controllers. At least in terms of resistance, they're still pretty stable. So how do you fix this? Simple. Copy homework. The dickheads that make the controllers I review should probably be looking at the Envision Pro and the Razer Wolverine Ultimate for inspiration, since the Wolverine Ultimate has a much lighter press. Probably a little too light for some people though. And while the SCUF Envision Pro, according to my testing, is a little more on par with the resistance you get from a lot of the dampened controllers, it still has a very short travel distance and a very stable press. I'm not entirely sure why this whole rubber pad thing, metal spring thing, sometimes there is nothing thing. It could be a reliability issue, something to keep dust out, for example. It could be something to do with a stability issue or something else to do with the design. But controllers like the Gamester T4K, the T4 Cyclone Pro, and both the Machinite controllers I've looked at kind of disprove that, since their buttons actually do feature a rubber pad and they're about as stable as Kai Cenat. And to be honest, reliability kind of varies between the dampened and non-dampened controllers, since the eSwap X controllers are again a bit of an outlier. So in conclusion, this is pretty shit. I'm not 100% sure why they do this. A lot of the time it sucks, the buttons are unstable, there's a lot of mush, and they don't really need to suck. For example, the FlyDigi controllers have a very thin rubber pad that kind of molds itself to the shape of the button, and their controllers have very, very little resistance, an okay travel distance, and they're extremely stable. So clearly, it doesn't have to suck, it just mostly sucks. This is all confusing as fuck. I am going to lay out all of the devices I have with all of their stats and stuff to kind of clear some things up. Using my Mega Ultra Force Gauge, I'll be testing all of these controllers here multiple times to extract an average. Anything under 100 grams-ish is ideal, and over 100 grams, you're getting a little retarded. And 100 grams sounds excessive, but it really isn't on these controllers. I'm assuming due to the surface area. I'm trying. That means with this 100 gram limit, out of the 5 correctly designed controllers with no dampening, only 2 of them make it in, that being, again, Scuffed Envision Pro and the Razer Wolverine Ultimate. After that, most notably, we have the Apex 4 and FlyDigi Vader 3 Pro, which have an extremely light actuation force, little travel distance, and they're pretty stable for being dampened buttons. They're by far the best performers out of the bunch. The 65 grams I got by my measurements is even more impressive than the 80 FlyDigi advertises for the Apex 4. The Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra. Expensive as hell, and the only one I've seen that uses a metal spring to dampen, but it comes in just under 100 at about 90-ish grams, which strangely is comparable to a controller a quarter of its price, that being the GameSir G7 at $45 with a total of 85 grams of force. The heavily related T4 Khalid and T4 Cyclone Pro are a little bit more excessive at about 110 grams for whatever reason, and they're also a lot less stable. Both modern Razer controllers, the Razer Wolverine V2 Chroma and the Wolverine V2 Pro for PlayStation, also kind of push it at 110 grams, but I'll allow them since they're very stable. And to be honest, they are much worse offenders, which we're going to shit on now. The remaining 3 of the 5 correctly designed controllers, that being AIM's PS5 controller, which is custom, and the Thrustmaster eSwap S and X all come in well over the limit at around 150 grams, but the Thrustmaster controllers are notably inconsistent between their buttons. It could have been worse, but nothing exceeded 165 grams at any time. The Machinite G5 Pro and G6 feature a lower resistance at 120 grams despite their half-membrane design, insane instability, and the G5 Pro having miles of travel distance. Believe me, Machinite controllers they're pretty shit, but unfortunately I can't really label them the worst because Razer's Wolverine Tournament Edition, an old Xbox controller from ages ago, beloved by many on the channel including myself, comes in at 220 fucking grams. Stable buttons, yes, but a ton of travel and a ton of resistance. How poetic. The company that came up with the dog shit name for this practice has the worst performing controller. This is called Mecha Membrane. Fuck! It's horseshit, isn't it? To put everything in perspective for you guys, I'll rank every single controller I have in this video from my collection. Of course, this is my opinion from my testing, which, you know, I did my best with the testing. It might actually be shit. I don't know. I think it's good. I did the best I could to keep everything consistent. And unfortunately, when it comes to like travel distances, when I note them in my graphs, I don't really have statistics for that because the distances they're actually talking about are incredibly small. But as the years float by, I'll be sure to add as much information as I can about new controllers or information about these controllers in a pinned comment. Comment on that to remind me to come back to this video. But to conclude this video, are mechanical buttons a scam? Kind of. The actuation distances, they're pretty interesting, especially compared to the marketing that they have. Because the marketing is talking about the actual switches, but the actual buttons themselves are closer to normal buttons that you'd find on a membrane controller than they are to the actual actuation distances advertised on their website. Sometimes by like a factor of 1 billion. So the marketing is a little meh, and the reliability angle of it only works with some of these controllers. It varies between devices. Shut up, Scarecrow. I don't care. He won't let me live. He just won't let me live. He always just starts fucking monologue.
He starts monologuing.
So I really suppose the scam kind of depends on what controller you're going for, as something like the Stealth Ultra is a bit of an unreliable controller that I plan to make another video on, by the way. Even though it uses commonly used switches, these go out often. And for the dampened controllers, there are good options. Like, again, the FlyDigi controllers do pretty well. So while there is a bit of an inconsistency, there are devices that are good, and, you know, I have everything ranked. If you're interested in purchasing any of these devices, links will be down in the description below for everything Amazon. There will be an official website for AIM, which I also have a discount code for. Somehow, still, got to review their controllers here soon. And in the future, I also want to cover more things like the clicky D-pads, which are wildly different between devices, different trigger stops, and a bunch of different stuff with custom controllers as well. But this has been the deep dive for mechanical buttons. I'll always be here. to warn you guys of cunty business practices. That's what I do. So subscribe, because you know you want to. Subscribe to the Discord if you want to show me something or talk to me. Just subscribe to the Instagram for thirst traps, you know what it is. And I hope to see you guys in my next video. Take it easy.